welcome you to today's webinar, a case study on data modeling for SAP applications. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Joy Ruff, and I am the GoToWebinar organizer for today's event. Joining me today is Lauren Yaton of Boeing. Lauren is a data architect in the data management team at Boeing, where he has been employed for almost 30 years. He has spent the last 20 years in data management disciplines and environments. Also joining us are Nick Porter and Roland Boulevant of Silwood Technology. Nick Porter is the technical director at Silwood with over 30 years IT experience and 20 of those in the information architecture space. Roland Boulevant is the sales and marketing director at Silwood with over 30 years experience in direct and partner sales, marketing, and product management in the software industry. We also have Ron Huizenga, the senior product manager for the Embarcadero ER Studio product family. Ron has over 30 years of experience as an IT executive and consultant in multiple data and business process disciplines. And with that, over to you, Lauren.
Thank you, Joy. Well, good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. I'm glad to share this information with you today. If you're like me, you're always after information and not sales, and I promise that I'm not here to sell you anything today, except perhaps the belief that the construction and use of data models makes development, even for commercial packages like SAP, and especially for conversion and integration activities and data governance efforts, so much more effective. In fact, I'm kind of hoping there's some system integrator people on that work with SAP and implementations, and because I just firmly believe that if they would implement this kind of methodology into their development methodology, it would be downright magical. I have enjoyed working with my new Safyr and Embarcadero friends collaborating on this project. So let me go ahead and get started. First, a little bit about our company. I think most people probably know us pretty well because I heard yesterday that 4 million people per day fly on Boeing airplanes. So we're a pretty well-known name. And what you may not know is that next year we'll be celebrating 100 years in existence. Our 2014 revenue was $90.76 billion, a fairly healthy amount. Wouldn't it be cool if in 2016 we hit 100 billion for our 100th year? Just thinking about that today. We are a top U.S. exporter. In fact, I heard this yesterday too. We are the top U.S. exporter in manufacturing space. So we're big. Some significant things about us. We merged with McDonnell Douglas in 1997. They were also a defense and space contractor as well as commercial airplane manufacturer, and so we support their models that are out there flying around still as well. In our commercial airplanes division, the models that are still being produced are 737, 747, 767, 777, and the new 787. On the defense and space side, notable products include the Delta IV rocket, Air Force One, a pretty recognizable airplane. We're the prime contractor on the International Space Station. We produced the B-1B Lancer. My favorite airplane, the A-10 Thunderbolt, affectionately called the Warthog, because it's not pretty, but boy is it effective. The F-15 fighter, F-18, different satellites, and we provide launch services for commercial and military satellites. If you're interested in seeing more about our products, head to www.boeing.com. There's lots of good stuff on there. A little bit about me. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Construction Management that I got from Washington State University about 4 years after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Boeing was kind enough to pay for an MBA while I was working for them, also quite a while back. I did that at City University, just as online programs were getting started, so I did about half of it online, half of it in the classroom. I have a certification from DAMA, Certified Data Management Professional, mastery level. That's really obnoxious. I can't believe I put that on there. Data management data management core, data warehousing. Um, I had 7 years of construction management experience in the industrial construction industry before I went to work for Boeing. In fact, I grew up working construction for my dad, who was a home builder. Some of my significant things that were kind of interesting is that I worked on some nuclear power plants for the Washington Public Power Supply System in the late 70s, early 80s. I believe that was ended up being the largest bond default on record at the time. They made the mistake of trying to build 5 nuclear power plants all at the same time, and did so right about the time 3 Mile Island happened, so that didn't work out so well. But it was an amazing project. Things like the largest mobile crane in the world. You know, I got to see some pretty cool stuff. Number 18 rebar, which is, you know, if you've ever done any light construction, residential or light commercial, the number 4 bar fits 4/8, so it's like ½ inch. This is 18/8, so it's, what's that, 2 1/4 inches. It's just this massive stuff. Anyway, that was cool. I worked in Prudhoe Bay, 300 miles inside the Arctic Circle, where the coldest it got was 102 below. And the sun never came up in the winter and never went down in the summer. It was really interesting, but it was 90. I had a 93 and a 95-hour week back to back, and when I came back from my week off, the first 2 or 3 days, all I could say was blah, blah, blah. And frankly, it was overwhelming, and I took a layoff rather than go back. And then I worked for a construction law firm. And that's where I was really first introduced to computing in a meaningful way. We developed a database on DBase 2 on an HP 80 machine, and then an HP 150, which was, I think, maybe the first touch screen, way before its time, but some really old technology. And then I went to work for Boeing, program planning, because my construction management experience included cost and scheduling, and they were finding that people with construction cost and scheduling experience had good that skill translated well to program planning for computing. So I was working for Boeing Computer Services, excuse me. Eventually led to data modeling, led to data architecture, did some large-scale integrated operational data stores and on Oracle and Teradata data warehouse, and most recently I've been working on this SAP implementation. That's way more than you needed to know about me. Joy, I think we had a poll to do, or 2 or 3, if you want to throw that in now.
4, I think, actually. 4. So, okay. Yes, we'd like to know a little bit about you folks in the audience. If you can respond to us with some information on what ERP systems you are currently using. Of course, Lauren has his experience with SAP, but there are other ERP systems like Salesforce, Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics. Interested in knowing which types of things you're using in the industry. Lauren, have you only worked with SAP and not any of these others?
In the ERP space, yeah, that's true.
Okay, that's great. All right, and I know Oracle actually has multiple pieces to the puzzle. I think Nick and Roland could talk about that in a little bit more detail if people are interested when they come up a little bit later. And certainly Salesforce is broadly known in the industry. Okay, so it looks like we've gotten a good chunk of votes in, so we will close and share this poll. Looks like, as we thought we would probably have today, 75% of our audience is using SAP, so they are going to definitely see a direct correlation with what you have to say, Lauren. But certainly the rest of you who are using ERP systems can be able to leverage the Safyr tool in the same way, so this will be helpful for you also. So let's go to our second poll, which is for those of you who are using SAP, and even those of you who aren't, if you've used it before, what kind of level of experience do you have? Lauren, how long have you been working with SAP now?
I think we first started working with it about 3.5 years ago.
Okay, so kind of right in the middle there.
Yep.
And have you found it to be fairly challenging to come up to speed on, or?
It's a monster. It's huge.
Yeah.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that later,
Okay.
why I think data modeling, the way we're doing it, can really help.
Okay. Sounds good. Looks like we're getting the bulk of our votes in, so we'll share these results. And half of our audience has less than 2 years of experience with SAP, so I think your experience is definitely going to be beneficial for them as well, to let them know what kind of gotchas we might be facing as they go through this.
Okay. Well, hopefully I won't get too technical, but we'll see.
Okay. I think we also wanted to find out about our audience's level of data conversion and integration experience. So we've got that one too. And Lauren, this was one you were wanting to know specifically. Is there a particular level you think people need to be at before attempting to do one of these projects?
Well, I mean, I think you have to have some people in leadership that that have significant experience, including with SAP or whatever the complex commercial package is that you're trying to implement. But there's roles for less experienced people to play too. There's a lot of grunt work that needs to be done, and it's a good place to start from the ground up to really understand down in the details. So there's room for all experience levels here.
Okay, well, let's check our audience here then. We'll share these results. Well, we have a lot of experienced people in this area in our group today, almost 60% of the team. So that's good.
Yep.
Some people who've got experience who can help be leaders in this area and work with the team on the SAP specific stuff. All right, and just one more poll to tell us who you are. What is your level of data modeling experience? And not just necessarily with ER Studio, but with any tool that's in the industry. And I know a lot of people who are maybe less experienced with data modeling are even using some basic things like Excel or Visio to just do some basic modeling stuff. Certainly those with more experience are hopefully using a more professional tool that provides good support for logical and physical models and comparing between a live database and a model and things like that, because that can definitely be helpful.
Okay, looks like significant experience in the data modeling.
Yeah, let me share these results here. Yeah, almost 70% of our audience, more than 5 years of data modeling experience. So I think we have a good crowd in the room. They have a good experience in a couple of key areas. SAP may be a little bit more of a challenge, or some of the ERP tools. So let's take it back to you and your presentation.
Great.
So go ahead, Lauren.
Sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we're done with the polls, so please proceed.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So a little bit about the organization. Commercial Aviation Services, the material management arm of that. We really are all about spare parts sales, and that's what this SAP implementation is about. This organization is multi-billion-dollar per year revenue generator of its own. We're supporting, I said 20,000, maybe it's more like 16,000 actually still in production airplanes, because, you know, some older airplanes, a lot of older airplanes are out of service, but you might be interested to know there's still like 200 707s flying around out there, and 800 727s. So these products last a very, very long time and have to be maintained, and the maintenance requirements are stringent and significant. I don't know if any of those 707s or 727s are operating in the U.S. or not, but they're out there flying and they have to be supported. The program, the requirement is to replace a 1990 IMS COBOL spares system, which itself was an upgrade of a 1982 IMS COBOL spares system. And of course, not being the most flexible architecture around, there are lots of bolted on applications and systems surrounding it, and many of those are being replaced as part of this as well. Since we started SAP, what did I say, 3.5 years ago, I think, Boeing is now doing a few more implementations, starting a few more SAP implementations, leading to a center of excellence and competency center as well. And there's room, I believe, for this kind of product that I'm going to show you a little bit about to support that bigger picture as well, maybe even more important than the application itself. One of the things that we have is significant regulatory requirements, because we have to support the type design for the life of the airplane. In other words, the airplane as it was designed, we have to keep that information and use that information, all of the engineering bill of material and drawings and all of the technical data for the life of the airplane, plus 50 years. And if the life of the airplane itself is 50 years, that's a 100-year requirement. Actually, I think I heard recently that they reduced it to just the life of the airplane. But it's still, if you think about the evolution of technology and the evolution, of both computing technology and of airplane technology over that span of time, you can imagine the data integration requirements are very significant. You're going to have all kinds of different structures that have to be integrated, and they're all disparate. They're not exactly the same, and so that's been a huge challenge. Another significant regulatory requirement, you've got to ship paperwork with every single part that goes out the door. Form 8130 is an example of that. I think that's when you're shipping internationally. But lots of stringent regulatory requirements. So we're the first ones with BCA SAP implementation experience, BCA Boeing Commercial Airplanes, sorry, SAP implementation experience. So we hired a system integrator because it's a beast. Like I said earlier, this thing is hugely complex, and you really, I think it would be a challenge for any in-house IT staff to just think they could come in and implement this without some outside experienced help. But we did keep the integration and conversion statement of work in-house, and that numbered in the low hundreds for integrations. It's significant. And was it a mistake to keep that in-house? I don't know, maybe. Was it political? Maybe. But we felt that we're the ones that understand the source data, which is, again, hugely complex and disparate and has to be integrated. So we've worked closely with the system integrator too, because they're the ones that have the understanding of the target environment that we're trying to hit, right? Okay. So the data model challenge was this. Enterprise architecture had a requirement for any large application to produce a logical data model. Why do they want us to do that? Well, I'll go to the third bullet first. We exist in a system of systems. We're not standalone, and we need to understand that. We need to be able to demonstrate the model and how it fits within the system of systems. But understanding the target for the purpose of conversion and integration experience is an immediate and important and necessary requirement as well. And then we've added data governance to our requirements as well. We're doing especially active data governance for customer master, material master, and vendor master using some tools within SAP. And we've had to collect some additional metadata to support that, which we are tracking most of it, I think, in ER Studio. Well, another challenge was that not a lot of business exposure to data models, and not really even that much on our IT team. So, we're kind of starting from scratch in terms of getting it used within the development effort, making sure that it gets appropriate exposure and education, and that's been a challenge because these projects tend to fly. But the thing is, with just SAP out of the box, I think this might even just be ECC. There's 95,000 tables. Well, how do you identify a relevant subset? Because we're not using 95,000 tables. Maybe we'll use a couple thousand. And even many of those are not all that relevant. So you got to get down to the relevant subset. But I tell you what, the bigger issue, and my why build a data model when the database is already built elevator speech, it requires a tall building, is that bad data quality costs organizations around 10% of revenue. I've seen studies that show that. So for the Boeing company, that's about $9 billion. Now that's obviously not all on the SAP project, that's across the enterprise, but it's still a big chunk of change. How do you fix those problems? How do you govern data without understanding what that data is supposed to be, without having a common documented understanding of what that data is supposed to be? How do you know and measure what it's supposed to be without defining it? And if it's not written down, if it's not codified in a disciplined form, everybody with an opinion has their own definition. No one's right, no one's wrong. You need something to point to. Data and information modeling disciplines have evolved over decades. We know what to do. It's not just about designing a database either. It's about understanding and governing the data. And because sometimes different people or groups have different perspectives about the same data, you have to harmonize the definition, and this all takes work. And the support of the people to understand the underlying business rules. So data is always the biggest challenge. It's always the tent pole item, data conversion, data integration. For every SAP project, according to our system integrator, it's always the biggest, nastiest part of the project. So thankfully, we found that even though the metadata is wrapped up in the application layer, there is a rich set of it in SAP. It's out of the box and pretty generic and not always perfect, but there's a lot of it, and it's a really, really good start. But you got to get it out of there. The visualization tools within SAP itself for the metadata are not so good, in my opinion. They're fine if you just need to get help on the definition of a particular attribute as you're trying to input data into the application. But other than that, it just doesn't seem like there's a great visualization or even data access capability with the data organized in meaningful ways that could be meaningful to business people as well as functional analysts and technical analysts. Thankfully, I had supportive management, and they allowed me to purchase Safyr, which allows me to extract data directly from that application layer in SAP. There's a small code piece that resides in ECC that extracts the data, and then it pulls it out and puts it in its own repository, and then you can export from there to a modeling tool, in our case ER Studio. And frankly, we simply could not have done what we did without some way to extract that metadata automatically. To hand enter it, to discover it and hand enter it would have taken thousands of hours. Anyway, I'll just go on from there. Okay, let's see. Yeah, let me just go to the next page. So the process, I already mentioned ER Studio plus Safyr, and we published to the web. We published using capabilities, or we created HTML products using ER Studio out-of-the-box capabilities, which I've been waiting for a long time and is finally here, and it's fantastic. The inputs for us into our process, our SAP implementation, late development, early test is when you you finally have a complete configuration that has all of the data that, where you know which tables and columns you're actually going to use. We, in our case, used to scope our modeling effort, we used the conversion and integration mapping documents. So we were kind of a trailing activity rather than a leading activity. We didn't have Safyr right away, and we didn't know SAP well enough to know that we could do this. We might have been able to help be a little more leading, especially with cooperation of the system integrator, if they would integrate something like this into their process, their development process. I think I mentioned this up front, it would be fantastic. So the process looks like this. First, you have to decide on a scoping strategy. You have to have some way to reduce that 95,000 tables down to the ones you care about. And like I said, in our case, we started with, anyway, the conversion integration mapping. With Safyr, they have the capability to sub-select on certain business areas, functions, specific transaction codes. We scoped on the conversion integration on the mapping that we had, because that told us specifically which attributes were going to be in use. So we were able to, we deleted the attributes, the columns that were not relevant. They were out of scope for us. So you install Safyr. You have to install a little piece on ECC, a little piece of ABAP code for those who know SAP. You extract the metadata. You decide on your scope, or you extract it and you export whatever scope you've decided on, however you've decided, into your modeling tool, ER Studio in our case. You decide on a partitioning mechanism for visualization and organization of the data models, of the metadata. And then it's not just diagrams either, it's the metadata itself. And I should be able to show you a little bit about our metadata spreadsheet, our data dictionary spreadsheet. To use the Safyr tool, you have to have an instance created, an SAP instance created, and at least partially configured in order to extract the data and get what's relevant. You could build an entity-only conceptual data model, information model, based on what you can find on the web, but it's really hit and miss, and is conceptual to the max in terms of there's no attribution at all. It's just entities, and it's just the most critical key ones. It's not anywhere approaching everything. By the way, I said T-code or transaction code. That really represents a set of screens associated with a specific subset of functions within SAP. I believe we were going to do a little Safyr demo, if you get ready for that. Let me just say one other thing real quick. Hey, there's Len Silverstone again. Okay.
That's great.
Go ahead. I'll go over the hierarchy after we get back. So go ahead and show show the demo.
Okay, thanks very much, Lauren. This is Nick Porter from Silwood, and I'm just going to give you a real brief demo and talk about some of the things that Lauren's been talking about. And I'm going to be looking, or we're going to be looking at an ECC6 instance that's been reverse engineered into Safyr, and we're going to look at this view of the metadata, and this shows us all the tables that are in this particular instance. So Lauren mentioned so 95,000 tables, and you can see here at the bottom, this is our internal SAP system. It's got, in actual fact, over 98,000 tables in it. And and Lauren talked about the fact that the challenge really is to kind of subset this down into manageable groups. You know, nobody wants to make a data model of 98,000 tables. It would be completely unintelligible. So one of the things that I know that Lauren is going to talk about is storage bins. It's one of the kind of concepts that's in use within his system. So let's just look at what we'd have to do to try and find the tables in SAP that are to deal with storage bins. So what we'll do, we'll do a wildcard search on the descriptive name of the table. That second column shows us the descriptive name of the table, and if I do a search on that, you can see at the bottom there that there's actually 20 tables in this particular system that have got that string somewhere in them. And if you just take your eyes over to the right of this screen, you've got these columns which show the number of directly related tables. So you can see number of child tables, number of parent tables, and there's also a row count. So we pull a row count, which gives us some idea about the amount of data in each table. So what we can do, we can sort this result set by number of relationships, and I've done this in descending order of child relationships. And so you can see now that the table with the string storage bin in its title, which has got the most child relationships, is that one at the top, storage bins. So we very rapidly come down to what looks like an interesting table for the task of working out storage bin tables. And if we double click on that table like I've done now, you're actually looking at the structure of that table. That first column, you can see the sort of fairly cryptic German name for each column, and then you've got the rather more helpful descriptive name. And these little green symbols here, these are foreign keys. You'll also maybe notice that as I click on each attribute, I get this longer definition coming up, which gives us a clue as to what the attribute is all about. All of this stuff has been taken from the SAP system. We're not deriving any of this. The definitions of objects, the relationships, the primary keys, the indexes, it's all as defined in the SAP system itself. So what I want to do now, I want to make what we call a subject area, and a subject area is just a grouping of tables. So I'm going to make a subject area called storage bin tables. And this is typically how you use the product. We're making a folder, and then what we can do, we'll take that table and we'll drag and drop it into the storage bin table. You'll see I've got some other existing subject areas as well. And then what I'm also going to do, I'm going to get this window up, which shows us the directly related tables. So you can see that the 8 parent tables are at the top of the list, and the 30 child-related tables are at the bottom. So just in order to make a more meaningful data model, I'm going to select those 8 parent tables, and I'm going to add them to my subject area of storage bin tables. So I've got a little group, there's actually 9 tables, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that subject area and I'm going to add it to an export, and I'm going to push that into a format that ER Studio can understand. I'm actually going to overwrite this file. So it's an export format, and then we can load this into ER Studio and you'll very rapidly see a model. So it's built that export format. We'll now switch across into ER Studio and we can import that file. And we'll take that file, load it in, and now we get a data model of that set of tables. I'm going to use one of the ER Studio layout features to just make a slightly better layout. And if I bring the display level up, now you can see what looks like really any other kind of data model. We've got meaningful object names, we've got relationships, we've got foreign keys, but this is now automatically populated. We've built this model directly from the set of objects that we included in the subject area. And this is the kind of thing that Lauren's been doing in terms of building up these different aspects of the model. I'm just going to very briefly go back into the product and show you one of the other things that Lauren was talking about. What we can do, we can browse that set of metadata based upon a hierarchy. So this hierarchy is showing us SAP modules, and this hierarchy is very large. It covers all aspects of the SAP system. So what I can do is I can do a search within that hierarchy, and I can search for things like transaction codes, T-codes. Lauren mentioned this. I can also search for actual programs. So what I'm going to do, rather than looking for tables, I'm going to look for any program that's got storage bin somewhere in its title. And you see it comes back with a bunch of tables, a bunch of programs. Each of these green icons is a program. And we can take one of these. Look, there's one here, storage units per storage bin. If I double click on that, it will position me in the hierarchy where that program lives. And then what I can see now is these sort of grid icons, those are tables. So what it's telling me is this particular program, this particular piece of functionality in SAP makes reference to or updates each of those tables in the system. And as you might expect, the one we started with, LAGP storage bins, that's in that list as well. And I could make a model out of this. I could take this set of tables and make a model out of this. So, very quick demo of the product. And now I'm going to hand back to Ron to Lauren to carry on the presentation.
Thanks, Nick. Okay, so getting into a little bit more specifics. So our presentation hierarchy, if you will, we have subjects and then sub-subjects that we call facets. The subjects in our case, we chose to make the work streams the subjects. Work stream being a large function, business function, and product data management being one. Order to cash. SAP has some sort of funny ways that they name things. Order to cash meaning from the time a customer places, from the point in the process or the customer places an order to the time they pay us for that order, we receive the payment. So OTC, order to cash. Procure to pay is the supplier facing one. Same kind of thing from the time we procure the part until the time accounts payable makes the payment. Warehouse management's a little more obvious. And then within each of those subjects, we have facets that I would say equate to information objects within each of those work streams. Material master within PDM, customer master within OTC, a purchase order within procure to pay, storage bin, the thing that Nick just showed you. These are mostly, not 100%, but mostly they are archivable, business objects or information products that have what I would call hard edges. They're real objects within SAP, which was a happy discovery. So we have then entities, relationships, and attributes within those facets. So forgive me, I know this is too small to read, but I can give you the context. In fact, some of what I'm going to show you is tiny for the purpose of not divulging any information, proprietary information. Boeing is very serious about protecting, about information protection, and increasingly so. So I erred on the side of caution with, unfortunately, I'd love to be able to share my whole model with you guys and get really specific, but I'm just going to have to kind of more talk about it in some cases. But here's an example of what I was talking about. You've got the product. This would be our subject level model, the highest level model, right? Each one of these big rectangles represents a work stream or a subject area. and then each box within that is an information product. And then for each of the work streams, I have a separate diagram that shows then the entities, attributes, and relationships within each of the colored boxes that you see here. The relationships that I've shown here are just the most fundamental ones, like you pick the primary entity and do the relationships between primary entities between these information products. This was our first cut. I think I've got 28 of those information products here. We are now integrating our SAP with a subsidiary's SAP implementation that they also sell spare parts. They're more of the distributor model. So we're going to implement and integrate one single SAP, and we're going from 28 information objects, although that was just our wave 1 implementation, to 101. So you can imagine it's getting more complicated and bigger. The presentation choices that you have to make, it depends on what you want to use it for, but in our case we chose to do a hybrid logical physical model with business and technical constructs that we were able to pull directly from SAP for the most part, and import that into the modeling tool. We laid it out manually, optimized for the audience. You saw what Nick did there. He moved some things around quickly. So it doesn't take too long, but it's a layout. But for the most part, a lot of people don't use the they won't use the diagrams themselves. They're going to use the metadata. They're going to use the data dictionary, which you can also then using attachments and other features within ER Studio, you can produce Excel spreadsheet metadata repositories that people can then filter as they need to. But the thing about SAP is you're looking at not just short names for at the physical model level. You're looking at abbreviations of German words. So it's really important to get those logical names up there. In my case, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not, if it might be too small, but when I show you in a minute, I've got the actual physical names in parentheses, both at the table level and the column level, where it is a logical physical construct. If it's just, there are some things that are just logical, most notably there's a classification characteristic where you can, in essence, add logical attributes to anything in SAP by using this class characteristics name value pair kind of structure that you can apply to any object, and those become logical attributes, but physically they're in this whole other object-oriented structure. If you wanted to do an information model, it would be more logical and it would require a little more manual intervention. But you might exclude some application-specific attributes, and of course you might change to your own company's naming standards. So one model per work stream. The boundary boxes within the work stream at each individual data model, like one per work stream, are those real objects with the hard edges that I talked about, and then within those are the entities / tables, attributes / columns. Okay, so giving a nod to my British friends, keep calm and carry on. The thing I'm about to show you is going to freak you out because it's just so tiny, but it's really just provided for context. And then I'll try to give you a readable, maybe readable subset. You look at purchase order. So here's one of the work streams, the models for one of the work streams. Now it would probably continue to get a little more complicated than this, but not horribly. But again, you can see that the shaded rectangles represent the information products, and then within those, you've got tables and columns or entities and attributes. You can see here, yeah, I think you can probably read this. You can see that you've got logical names, and again, these are pulled straight out of the repository. their metadata repository. They're not great names, but they're generally understandable. And then in parentheses afterward, I put that abbreviated, often German abbreviated word that is the physical column name or the physical table name. It's funny, they start talking physical, the functional people start using the physical names for things. It's kind of funny to watch. The ZZ columns attributes are the custom ones that we add, which oddly enough is not, it's considered more of a configuration than a customization. So that kind of gives you an idea of at a detailed level, and with something that's common to everyone, purchase order, kind of most people will understand that. So that's the one I picked as my example. I will pop over to our data model web page. It's going to look significantly different than this, but this was my starting point. You know, just a brief explanation with a connection to a wiki article about what a data model is for those who don't know anything about it. And then each of these would take me to a workstream data model, aka a subject area data model, like the busy one that was so tiny that you couldn't read that I showed you a minute ago. But then there's a link to the metadata spreadsheet, which is basically, it's just a report out of ER Studio. You can customize this. This is just what we chose to do. Whoops. Sorry. I have to move this out of the way. Excuse me. Maximize that. So you can just get an idea. What the submodel is basically the subject area, right? And then entities, so the logical table name or the entity name, the technical table name attribute, the business definition. For data governance purposes, for a smaller subset of things, we've created a report that contains significantly more data than this. And it's stuff that we have to collect from the work streams and then upload back into the data dictionary. So the point being, you can customize for your purposes what it is you want to show. This was kind of the basics we were just showing. One of the things that we're going to do is, you know, you've got a definition for an attribute that is the out-of-the-box definition. Well, your company is going to use it a little differently, probably. Maybe in a narrower way. Maybe the definition is very broad. You'll use it more narrowly. Well, so we're adding a definition that's a Boeing specific definition. You don't see that here, but that will be on the next version of this. I believe that was my, oh yeah, possible futures governance. Actually, that's happening now. I created this presentation months ago. Change management, impact analysis, we'd use it for that. I'd love it to be able to use this in a leading way where the system integrators weave this into their processes. This is partly trailing the way we're using it now and partly leading. On the data governance space, it's leading. Where you have enterprise with multiple SAP implementations like we are going to have, you can demonstrate the differences between your different applications and how they use how they each use SAP, where they're common, where they're different, where they're using it for different purposes. And I believe that is my last slide. So let me turn it back over to you, Joy.
Great, thanks so much, Lauren. I think we're going to pass the baton over to Roland now, so we can do just a little wrap up on the Safyr side. But that was a great presentation, a lot of good detail, and certainly showing the complexities that you worked with, but how you were able to make those much more manageable with the tools that you have. So Roland, whenever you're ready to share your screen. And
yep. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah,
but
I'm just looking for no, and I'm looking for the. I think you need to make me. Have you made me presenter?
Yes.
Yeah.
You should just be able to share your slides.
Yeah, I don't seem to be able to do that just at the moment. Show my screen. No, I can't. I don't seem to be able to share my screen. Ah,
moment. So perhaps if I just talk through, rather than waste time on technology, I'll just talk through what I did have. Hopefully thank you very much to Lauren for that presentation. I hope it's shown how that you can increase the value that your enterprise is gaining from these large, complex packaged applications, and use some tools to alleviate data complexity and allow you to exploit the metadata that's in those applications for your information management projects. In terms of a next action from Silwood, or for if you want to learn a bit more about us, the website is silwoodtechnology.com, and please have a look at the website. You can contact us to have an exploratory call or for a demonstration of the software, and you can also request a piece of evaluation software to have a look at Safyr for yourself. So I think with that, Joy, given we're sort of running ahead of time, I'll pass back to you, and I'm not quite sure what's happened to the technology, but never mind. Okay.
So sorry about that. I was trying to pull you.
I think don't worry about it. It's fine. It's fine. Okay. So yeah, please do get in touch if you'd like to know a bit more. That's all.
Great. Yes. And I'll provide the web link for Silwood's website in the chat box shortly. And at this point, then we will hand it over to Ron Huizenga.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, and great presentation, Lauren, and the gentleman from Silwood as well, obviously. I just want to make a few concluding remarks to give a little context around all of this in terms of the way we see the world from an ER Studio perspective, as it were. And one of the things that you're seeing, obviously, and this is an example of it, that in our organizations we're seeing hugely evolving database ecosystems and application ecosystems in our companies. So while we can have complex ERP solutions such as SAP and that type of thing, that's usually just one part of it. As Lauren said, it's really a system of systems, and so there are a lot of other pieces that you need to be able to integrate information to and from. But to be able to do that, you really need to have a solid understanding of what that information and the data is that you're working with to pull it all together. On top of that, and this is typically referred to in the big data context when people talk about the volume, velocity, and variety of data, but it's also equally applicable to these types of solutions as well. I mean, when we're looking at things like 95,000 plus tables, for example, there's a lot of variety of data there, and the piece you need to be able to hone in on the pieces that are important to you, not only from a technical perspective, but also to allow your business to supply those definitions for what's really important to you to manage as a business itself. And combined with all that, as we're pulling these types of things together, we also want to make sure that the tools that we're using allow us to work in an agile fashion. Even if we're not doing pure agile software development, there's still a very good iterative approach to really start pulling this information together, going through iterations, and building up the definition of what that information looks like, and the definitions and metadata around it so that it can be truly useful to your organization itself. What I want to talk to you about here is the piece that you saw today was the one shown at the top, was just the ER Studio Data Architect piece, which shows the data models itself. We demonstrated that we can import the important metadata and create the diagrams in the tool, and also have a lot of ways to communicate that information out. So we saw things like the reports, as well as be able to import and export through things like our ER Studio macros. But something very important to show is that the Data Architect is one portion of the ER Studio Enterprise Team Edition suite. So in addition to that, you have a repository behind it, so you can check in and check out your models, make changes and your updates, and document those changes as to why things are being done as well. You can link across the model. So for instance, you may have things like customers or those types of things that you have some information about in SAP, but it's extremely likely that you're going to have other parts of information about customers, or in Boeing's case, the airplanes, through a lot of other systems. If you have the model showing that information, you can even do cross-linking of those concepts across the models in the repository through concepts like universal mappings. To share the information out, Team Server is a great place where we can actually publish out the models and share it with our technical stakeholders as well as our business users. And more importantly, it also allows that higher level of collaboration. So we talked about in this webinar the ability for Boeing to add their own business definitions. Well, we have the data dictionaries and the data architect and then the repository themselves, but the business glossaries reside in team server. So now you have a truly business-focused definition that the business is responsible for creating, and those can be linked to the appropriate underlying objects in the models themselves. And it's a very seamless approach to use them both from the modeling side of things and to consume them on the team server side of things, which is an unlimited user web interface. So you can have everybody in your team participating together. Things to just kind of wrap up is, obviously, with all of the different platforms out there, you want extremely accurate forward and reverse engineering. And in instances like this with the ERPs, as it was pointed out, a lot of that information that you would get from traditional forward and reverse engineering, you need to go an extra level to be able to pull that information out of the application such as SAP. And that's where Safyr fills that void, and it's an extremely powerful tool to bring that metadata in so you can work in it in your data models along with everything else that you're doing and present a unified view of really understanding that data landscape that your organizations are working with. Again, I've talked about some of these things already, but just like SAP or internal databases and systems have updates, SAP has database and that type of thing. So when they're updating, you will probably find yourself extracting the metadata out using Safyr again, and then you can use powerful capabilities in ER Studio, such as compare and merge capabilities, to show you what actually changed to really help you adjust what you're doing in terms of correcting your integrations or adding more functionality and that type of thing. You need that solid data basis to be able to do that. The last point I'd like to make about the ER Studio and where it fits as well is we view the ER Studio as part of an ecosystem as well. We have the modeling capabilities that include the data modeling, the business glossary, team server. We also have something called Business Architect, which allows you to modify model business processes, and those business processes can reflect the objects that you have in your ER Studio data models as well. So again, you can not only define the data, but the processes that act on that data, and that really gives you context of what you're working with as well. In addition, for your DBAs and that type of thing, we have a suite of development tools such as DB Artisan and the new Performance IQ Performance Suite. And in the middle, what you see in this particular diagram is the team server is the backbone to allow exchange of that metadata, not only with our third-party products, but also with DB Artisan and those types of things. And you're going to see more and more integrations start to show up with other third-party products through this layer as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Joyce so we can answer any Q&As. And this is just a very quick overview slide of how the basic Safyr process works in terms of how the information comes from the different solutions, some of the things that Nick showed you in terms of the searching and filtering capability in the repository, and then ultimately pushing it out to ERX models, which we consume and then work with in the ER Studio product suite.
Great. Thanks so much, Ron, and thanks to all of our presenters today. For those of you in the audience, if you'd like to ask a question, please locate the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel, and you can type your questions into the box. The first question that we have, Lauren, I think is for you because it came in while you were talking about your configuration. Can you talk about subject areas? Did you have those predefined, or did you have a conceptual model, or how did you establish those?
Yeah, so that was one of the things that we had to decide early on, is how do we want the big buckets to look. And I made the decision to align them to the work streams themselves because all of the other work was aligned that way. At the time, it felt a little too processy, if you will, too functional rather than a pure data orientation. But as it turned out, the way SAP is organized, it really did align pretty well to a data subject orientation as well as a process or a functional orientation. So the work streams won out pretty early on, and I have not looked back. I mean, I've not regretted that decision. That answered the question?
Great. Yes, thank you. Roland, a question for you and Nick on the Oracle support. I know there are multiple Oracle flavors. Can you just call those out briefly?
Yeah, sure, Joyce. So the Oracle applications that we support are, in no particular order, JD Edwards, which is sometimes called PeopleSoft Enterprise 1, PeopleSoft Enterprise, Siebel, and Oracle e-Business Suite. Those are the 4 that we do.
Okay, great. And okay, so on another question, I think, Ron, this one might be for you. For ER Studio, if someone wants to implement a physical model to a database, then do you have to have Team Server to link the data architect with the physical database? Ron, I think you're muted.
Oh, thanks, Joy. Yes, in ER Studio, you do not need Team Server to actually connect to the databases or the physical databases themselves. The forward and reverse engineering capabilities, as well as the compare and merge capabilities to look at differences between implementations of models or versions of the databases themselves, is all in the ER Studio Data Architect tool. The Team Server is really a collaboration space for publishing of the models, tying in the business definitions, and really sharing the information across your organization.
Okay, perfect. Well, it looks like we are out of time and done with questions. So once again, thank you to all of our presenters today, especially Lauren Yaton for all the great content on your specific case study example of implementing SAP in your environment. With that, I would like to remind everyone about our survey. I have posted that link in the chat window. Your feedback is very important to us. We always want to improve and provide webinar topics that are the most relevant to you. It's because of your previous feedback that we're able to work with Lauren, Nick, Roland, and Ron to present today's topic. Also, if you're interested in other Embarcadero events going on, please visit the events page on the Embarcadero website or connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. If you've missed any portion of this presentation, the recorded webinar will be made available via email to attendees and registrants next week and will be posted on the events page of the Embarcadero website. On behalf of Embarcadero Technologies, I thank you for attending today's event. Have a great day.